Alright, you're good to go.
Okay, so, I'm Ryan,
I'm Evan.
and over the past month we've been working on something called the Inquiry Project, where the driving question is, how can we make San Francisco a better place?
So the question we wanted to explore was how can we make sure everyone can express themselves and how can we make sure that everyone has a place in the Bay Area?
So originally we started looking into public nudity in San Francisco and if it should be legal or not. It's a very controversial subject and it's very local to San Francisco. But then we realized that our project is more broad than that, and we started looking into other forms of self-expression.
So in the middle of 2011, nudists started cropping up around the Castro. Previously, nudity had been an occasional sight around the neighborhood, but this sudden outburst made it into a regular occurrence. A group of men calling themselves the Naked Guys started congregating in a certain plaza around the Castro to relax in the summer sun.
The group got bigger and bigger, and eventually out-of-town nudists from as far as San Mateo started coming in to just be nude during the day and return home at the end of the day. So citizens of the Castro got fed up with this, and they turned to their district supervisor, Scott Wiener, to do something about the problem.
On November 8, 2011, legislation introduced by Wiener was passed that required nudists to have a towel or something when sitting on public seating or public property, and it banned nudity in restaurants. And then on December 4th, 2012, an ordinance was passed that banned public nudity completely in San Francisco.
We wanted to figure out what the problem was. So initially we asked town school students if they had been affected by it at all. And 50% of them had been affected in some way or shape or form. From there we looked a lot into what the San Francisco News was saying. And we realized that it was either a very blanket yes or no. There was really no middle ground.
This graph shows what almost the entire town school 8th grade said about public nudity. 50% of the town schoolers said that it should be legal. 13.5% said yes, but it should have some restrictions. And 34.6% said no. Numbers don't quite add up. So one of the more common opinions we saw was that it's a debate about free speech, but that's not really the case. Judge Edward Chen, who upheld the ban on public nudity in San Francisco, said that nudity is not inherently expressive. He said that someone that's naked could simply be sunbathing rather than trying to send a message. In addition, the Supreme Court has also ruled that nudity is not inherently expressive. In our mind, the real issue lies with the identity of San Francisco.
In a Google video we watched, one person said that no matter what ethnicity, sexuality, you will always be welcome in San Francisco. So we started to look into other forward-thinking cities like Toronto and Munich to see what their laws were on the subject.
Toronto bans public nudity except during LGBT parades, similar to San Francisco. But Munich has recently legalized public nudity in 6 different areas around the city. We think that a program like that might really work for San Francisco because it allows nudists to have somewhere to go without disrupting the general public.
This may not be possible in San Francisco because Munich covers a large 120 square miles versus San Francisco's small 7 by 7.
So that's what we looked at with nudity. But like we said earlier, we didn't just look at public nudity. We also looked into other things that might be considered self-expression, mainly graffiti.
As for graffiti, there's a more concrete problem. Property owners in graffiti-prone areas, such as Oakland, are getting fed up with having to constantly repaint their walls. The city is trying to help. In 2012, the penalty became a misdemeanor, not an infraction, and the fine amounts were raised. However, a unique approach is being taken by the San Francisco Arts Commission in the city of Oakland. They're starting programs called I Do It for Oakland and other programs where they're creating places for artists to create their graffiti legally.
So the way these program works is private property owners allow the programs to use their walls for a mural or a painting. This is because in the tagging community, a painted wall is usually respected as being taken, so the taggers won't paint over it. However, although Street Smarts reports an 80% success rate, Street Smarts is the program done by the SFAC, they report an 80% success rate with their murals. SFPD graffiti guru Martin Ferreira says that they're not always effective. He says that some muralists actually get targeted by the graffiti community because maybe they have a bad reputation, and some murals work better than others. He says if you're going to get a mural, you should go for a landscape or a portrait, not something with letters or numbers, because the writing sometimes gets graffiti artists angry. Another one of the problems with this program is that the cost is pretty high. Some of the paintings cost up to $1,500, or that's the base entry point. So it's not always a viable option.
Not only does cleaning up graffiti cost a lot of money, it's actually second in complaints behind Muni on the 311 app. And speaking of the 311 app, it's an app that the city has created where you can take a picture of the graffiti that you see, and then it automatically creates a police report. And what the city does, or what the police department does, is they can make a large file against that certain tag or graffiti, so that once they catch the person that's been doing that same tag in action, then they can charge him with multiple accounts of the vandalism. A similar system was introduced in a city near LA, and they they saved 55% of their graffiti fund. And if we were to do the same thing, we would save $11 million in tax money.
So now we started the most interesting part of the project, the field research. The day before the field research, we actually had no meeting set up, but then we got 3 quick emails and all of a sudden had 4.
Our first meeting was with Officer Burks at the Mission Police Station. There we learned that graffiti is actually an infraction, not a misdemeanor.
Or public nudity.
Or public nudity, sorry.
So after that, we went down to City Hall to meet with Supervisor Scott Wiener, who represents the Castro, and he's the one that introduced all this legislation. He made some really interesting points, and he told us that really the issue wasn't with the act of being nude itself. It was about how they used the plazas, and it was so common. He said that if people were having picnics instead of being nude, there would still be an issue just because of how the public space was being dominated by one action, and the other residents of the Castro couldn't really use it.
After we met with Supervisor Scott Wiener, we met with Supervisor London Breed. She was very helpful with the graffiti aspect of her project because she actually used to be in charge of a nonprofit arts program. There she knew a lot of graffiti artists personally. Her opinion was that the taggers were really the main issue because they're really about getting the most street cred and getting their tags in the hardest to reach or the most noticeable places. Legislation that London passed reforms the way that graffiti is handled and makes taggers much easier to catch.
So finally, we went to a graffiti workshop in the San Francisco Library. It was more aimed at homeowners trying to prevent graffiti on their property. They said that previously the law was not very favorable to a property owner. They used to get a cleanup bill for the graffiti without any explanation. Now the recent legislation changes that, and it's trying to make it better for the homeowners. Now when the city sees graffiti on their property, they post a notice, which are trying to make more visible, that you have 30 days to clean it up. If you don't clean it up within 30 days, you get a $276 fine, and then you have 15 more days. If you don't clean it up within those 15 days, they hire someone to come clean it up, and they give you the bill.
At the workshop, we learned many ways to deter taggers. A few of the ways is getting lights and cameras, because the thing about taggers is they hate getting caught, and it's really easy to convict them with video evidence. And like I said before, usually they already have a big case against them, so they can charge them with multiple accounts. Another way to catch taggers is their tag. Officer Ferreira knows many tags personally, and he knows what gang they're coming from. Ferreira works tirelessly, but one of the main issues is they don't have enough officers on duty. They only have 1,600 officers on duty at one time when the city requires them to have a minimum of 1,971.
Alright, so with all this information, what are we going to do about public nudity and graffiti in San Francisco? First off, we're going to designate Marshall's Beach, and then this area on Ocean Beach from Judah to Noriega as spots where public nudity is legal. Marshall's Beach is just north of Baker Beach. It's like 3 to 5 minutes away, and it's hidden from the road. And then the spot on Ocean Beach is unfortunately in the middle of the road, or in the middle of the beach. but it's hidden from the road by these large sand hills, so people walking by or cars driving by don't have to see nudists if they don't want to. We chose not to pick we chose not to pick spots in parks because the city has had, there's been no public nudity in city parks for the past 30 years, even when public nudity was legal, and we chose not to pick spots in the city because it's already pretty crowded, so we thought the beaches had more space.
90% of graffiti is vandalism, but 10% is art. So we need a place to put that art. We're planning to coordinate with property owners who have big walls on the sides of their buildings where they want to put up a mural or a nice piece of artwork. And so there we'd coordinate with local artists and they can put up their own creations like this one. Another thing that we would do is work with the tech companies like Google who have these huge white buses that come to the city, and they just are not nice to look at, and a lot of people are kind of upset with them. So we're hoping to coordinate with a few of the companies and put some local artwork on them so that they're nicer to look at. We'd also make 2 free walls around the city for any artist at any time to come work on and make a new creation. From there, we'd also create 10 more graffiti workshops to kind of inform the general public about what's going on with all of these new things. And once we did that, we would rent 10 billboards to advertise the 311 app, the graffiti workshops, and the graffiti watch program. Yeah. Thank you.
Do you have any questions from the audience?
Okay.
Well, I have 2. The first one is, where will you get the money to rent these billboards and to create these workshops and stuff like that?
Those would come from the savings that would be that we would get from the 311 new uses,
Okay.
because then we could inform more people about them and hopefully reduce the graffiti spending even more.
So if we were to save $1 million, then
Right,
yeah, it would be.
All right. That might hurt. I have one more question. I was just wondering what your own personal opinions were on both subjects, the public nudity and the graffiti.
I don't really have an opinion about public nudity, but I think that people who really believe in public nudity should have a place for that in San Francisco, and it's been a part of